A colossal stone wall, perfectly seamless. Modern engineering can't explain it. That's the enigma of these ancient palaces. Master builders created wonders our technology still struggles with. We're looking at 15 lost palace designs. Infrastructure designs, modern architects can't replicate them. By the end, you'll understand secrets that could change how we build, how a palace survived earthquakes, using stones designed to dance, and a hidden system. A system that turned flowing water into a private acoustic shield. These forgotten blueprints, they represent a peak of human ingenuity, blending art, science, and deep mystery. They challenge the idea that progress is a straight line forward. What does it mean for a civilization to truly master its environment? The ambition in these structures makes you wonder what kind of world could create minds like that. Their foundation was completely alien to ours. A palace was never just a building. It was a living symbol, a declaration of a ruler's divine right, a map of the cosmos in stone, a physical prayer for harmony between heaven and earth. Every cornerstone, every corridor alignment carried a meaning we can barely grasp now. Architecture was a sacred act. The knowledge wasn't public science, it was a guarded mystery. Guilds of artisans, often tied to priestly orders, held these secrets close. Their blueprints weren't paper and ink. They were songs, stories, symbolic rituals passed from master to apprentice over lifetimes. The real engineering was woven into the culture itself. A deep understanding of materials, astronomy, the land, learned by hand and heart, not simulated on a screen. That's the first great chasm between their world and ours. We have advanced tools, but they had a unified vision where engineering, art, and spirituality were inseparable. When empires fell, when languages faded, when disasters reshaped continents, these intricate webs of knowledge often shattered. The stones remained, but the living intelligence behind them, the why and the how, vanished into silence. So when we stare baffled at a wall that shouldn't stand or a chamber that defies physics, we're not just confronting a technical puzzle. We're encountering the ghost of a civilization's entire worldview, etched permanently into the landscape. That context is the essential backdrop. For the specific, astonishing feats we're about to see, the gap in understanding, that's the mystery. We can't replicate these designs. It's not about our tools. Our tools are powerful. It's about lost context. It's like a symphony written in a notation we've forgotten. We can hear the notes, we can feel the emotion, but we can't reassemble the orchestra that first played it. The real challenge is a trilemma, a three-sided puzzle. Solve one piece, you break another. First, we could use modern methods. Reinforced concrete, steel frames, computer-guided machinery. We could build a palace that looks identical from the outside, but it's a facade, a replica with the shape but none of the soul, none of the durability. It's a photograph of a living person. The second path is historical authenticity. Use only the tools and materials they had. And here we hit the silent void. The quarries are exhausted. The mortar recipes are lost, alchemical blends of local ingredients and ritual, and the guild knowledge, the lifetime of tactile skill passed from master to apprentice, the intuitive sense of how a stone would settle over centuries. That living library is closed. We're trying to copy a signature without knowing how they held the pen. The third path is scientific study. When we analyze these structures with lasers and sensors, we find principles our own engineering is only now stumbling upon. Shock absorption through flexibility, passive cooling through air channels, acoustic manipulation through geometry. The ancients didn't get this from equations on a whiteboard. It emerged from a deep, generational dialogue with their environment. That's the thread for every entry on our list. It's not just a catalog of old buildings. It's a record of different technological evolutions, paths of ingenuity that branched away from our own, paths that achieved heights we're still straining to see. The real question is, what did they know that we are only beginning to remember? The Palace of Nasis in Crete. It's in a place with a lot of earthquakes, and it's been there for thousands of years. So the question is how it survived. The answer is in the foundation. They found these large stone blocks, and between them there were gaps, these intentional gaps, and they were filled with a material, a mix of clay and crushed pottery. It's crumbly. It looks like a weakness, but it was a damper. When the ground shook, these layers allowed the stone blocks to shift, to slide against each other. They absorbed the energy. They stopped it from going up into the wall, so the whole palace could sway. It could move without breaking. It's like reeds bending, not a rigid tree. We do something similar now with base isolators, rubber and steel pads. We got there with science. The Minoans got there with observation, with a feel for the land. The specific knowledge is gone, which clay mixture worked just right. How they tuned it, that's lost. But the palace is still there. It survived by moving, not by standing rigid. Mastering an environment can mean moving with the earth, but it can also mean controlling the sound of a space. The Alhambra Palace in Spain has a secret in its courtyards. You can hear it, but you can't see it. It's the sound of engineered silence. The network of water channels and fountains, especially in the Court of the Lions, is a work of hydraulic acoustics. It wasn't just for beauty or to cool the air. Every curve in a channel, every precise depth of a basin, every calculated flow of water was a deliberate act of sonic design. This system used only gravity and geometry to shape the palace's soundscape. In one courtyard, the gentle trickle of water might amplify a whisper, carrying it clearly to someone listening. In another, the same water would cascade in a specific pattern to create a blanket of white noise. A natural acoustic curtain that made private discussions truly private. Modern engineers can analyze these effects. They can map the echoes with microphones and software. But to start from scratch, to design a new palace where water, architecture, and sound are woven into a single instrument, using only the principles the Moors had, that remains an elusive art. It reveals a philosophy where every element served multiple purposes, where physics and poetry were the same discipline. The goal wasn't just to build walls, it was to craft an entire atmosphere. To design not just for the eyes, but for the ears and the soul. Water could take sound away, but it could also take away something a city needs even more. Long before that, in the Indus Valley, there was a whole civilization that handled water in a way that still seems incredibly modern. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro is the famous part. But the real wonder is what it was linked to, a hygiene system fit for a palace that served the whole city. 4,500 years ago, when many places just wanted to get rid of waste and forget it, the engineers there saw it as a physics problem, a public health issue, a design challenge. Their answer was a network, self-cleaning latrines, covered brick drains that ran under the streets. This wasn't just a ditch. Each drain was made from bricks shaped precisely, fitted together so tight they needed almost no mortar. The slopes were calculated to a gentle grade, so waste and water would flow at the right speed, fast enough to not clog, slow enough to not erode. In some parts they even had an early water seal, a U-shaped bend that would hold water to block smells and pests coming back up. The whole design expected to be flushed, using bathwater or rainwater to scour the channels clean. It was infrastructure built to last, needing very little upkeep. Today, of course, we can build much bigger systems. Our pipes are standard. Our pressure comes from pumps. Our materials don't react. The puzzle isn't about copying one piece. It's about the whole vision. The builders of Mohenjo-Daro, with no metal tools, no concrete, no global supply chain, made a system perfectly suited to its place and its people. They thought about material longevity, how the local brick would wear over centuries. They thought about urban planning, weaving the system into the city's layout from the start. And most of all, they thought about communal well-being on a scale we still often miss. Public health wasn't an afterthought. It was a cornerstone of civilized life. To rebuild what they made with their limits would mean giving up our compartmentalized thinking. We'd have to see the whole city, its water, its baths, its homes, its waste, as one connected organism. That kind of foresight built into a city's first stones is a design principle we haven't quite found again. Designing a city is one thing, designing a climate is something else. There were these palaces of light in the forest of France long before Versailles. They were experiments, a forgotten physics. The sun was a servant directed by architecture. These were the lost precursors. Grand symmetry had a hidden purpose, thermal control. The genius wasn't in the opulent halls. It was in the humble corridors, long, narrow passageways. They weren't just for passage. They were solar alignment corridors, angled with a precision that feels almost celestial. Their goal was to capture the weak, low-angle sun of a French winter, to pull it like a thread of gold deep into the stone heart of the palace. And they did this with more than windows, polished metal sheets, strategically placed mirrors. Reflective plaster. These acted as guides, bouncing light and its warmth into rooms that would otherwise be frigid crypts. Then, with the same elegant intention, the design would reject the sun. Summer would come. The high arc of the sun would be blocked by calculated overhangs, by shutters integrated into the aesthetic, by the very angle of those same corridors. The building breathed with the seasons. It warmed itself in winter. It cooled itself in summer, all without a single furnace or a fan. This passive solar design, it's the holy grail of modern sustainable architecture. We have complex software now to model sun paths, advanced materials to trap heat, but to achieve what those anonymous French architects did, to weave such a perfect passive thermal system into the very bones of a grand artistic masterpiece, using only manual calculations, an intuitive grasp of geometry, a deep patience, that ideal remains just out of reach. Theirs was a harmony of form and function so complete the machinery was invisible. The comfort was simply there, as if ordained by nature, a silent testament to a time when building was a dialogue with the sky. The granite blocks fit together so tightly you can't even push a blade of grass between them. That's the Inca stonework but the real thing isn't the seam itself, it's the thinking behind it. This wasn't just careful cutting, it was a whole different way of building, right there in the stone. They call it ashlar masonry, but that's just a name. What it really was a system. Every one of those huge granite blocks was a unique shape, irregular, a three-dimensional puzzle piece made for one exact spot in the wall. You didn't need mortar. The friction, the way they locked together that held it, to us now it looks chaotic, like a jumble of rocks. But to an engineer, it's modular design. Each stone is its own unit, locked to the ones around it. Earthquakes happen there in the Andes all the time. A rigid wall made of uniform bricks would just crack, it would crumble. But this wall has a secret, it can dance. The stones locked by those complex shapes, they can shift, they can sway, they settle. They absorb all that energy from the shaking earth and then they just settle back into place. The whole wall moves like one flexible thing, it breathes. It's architecture that knows it's part of a mountain, a living, moving mountain. We could try to copy this now. We could use laser scanners to map every irregular stone. We could program robots to cut granite with perfect precision. We could build a replica, theoretically, but that's missing the point. The Inca method wasn't about working around a lack of technology. It was a different kind of intelligence, a spatial intelligence. An artisan with a stone hammer and a bronze chisel would look at a raw boulder and see the shape inside it. The process made almost no waste. Every chip, every fragment had a use. The construction was efficient. It was quiet. It was part of the landscape. To try and replicate that today with our mindset, with all our technology, it would be absurd, ethically, economically. Just the energy cost of the scanning, the robotic cutting, the transporting of mock-ups, it would be huge. We'd be using the peak of modern industry to make a poor copy of an ancient system. A system that was sustainable, sublimely sustainable. The stones they ask a hard question. Is our advanced technology making us better builders, or is it just letting us build without understanding? Had walls that could move with the earth. But there was another palace in a desert empire that learned to work with the air, Persepolis, the Persian ceremonial capital, a statement of power carved right into a sun-baked plain. Its great halls were meant for kings, for ambassadors from everywhere, and they faced this brutal problem. A vast stone space crowded with people under a relentless sun. How do you keep it cool? Their answer wasn't to fight the climate, it was to conduct it. The evidence points to a kind of invisible engineering. You had these tall, slender shafts, ventilation shafts rising from the palace walls. They weren't random, they were angled precisely to catch the region's prevailing winds, the winds that came across the mountains and the deserts. But catching hot wind isn't the solution. The next step was the real move. These shafts funneled the air down, deep down below the palace floors, into a network of underground canals, the qanats, ancient water channels. They brought cool water from distant mountains. So in the dark, quiet earth, the hot desert air would flow over that cold water, over the damp canal walls, and a simple exchange happened. The air shed its heat. It cooled dramatically just from that contact with the water and the stone. Then, guided by the same careful design, this newly cooled air was drawn back up. It would rise through vents in the floor, whispering into the great halls above. The effect was a natural air conditioning, constant and silent, a breath of the desert transformed into a cool breeze. This wasn't a machine, it was a system. Wind capture, water and geothermal cooling, all woven into one solution. The palace didn't just sit on the land, it breathed with it. To try this today on that scale, it's a puzzle. Our modern approach is to sever the building. We seal the windows, we crank the machinery. We use immense energy to create a bubble, an artificial weather. The architects of Persepolis wanted the opposite. Their design was a dialogue. It required a deep reading of local wind patterns, water tables, geology. It asked for architecture to become an instrument of the landscape. We have the technology, of course. We can model wind flow. We can dig canals. But to design a new palace, a grand symbolic space that starts not with a floor plan, but with a study of the wind and the water, to make those natural forces the central pillars, in a way that's both monumentally beautiful and silently efficient, that art, that true environmental symbiosis, it feels just out of reach. We build shelters from nature. They built a partnership, a floor that sings a warning. That's a defensive idea, almost poetic. Nightingale floors at castle are the famous case. You take a step down a corridor and it chirps, a deliberate sound, but that was just the surface. There was a deeper acoustic art in older fortress palaces, most of them gone now. Those designs went beyond a simple squeak. They engineered whole galleries to act as instruments, long hallways, audience chambers, stairwells, tuned for security. The principle was resonance. Builders would vary wall thickness, create hidden cavities between plaster and wood, shape rooms to specific proportions. The goal was to amplify certain sounds with total clarity over a distance. The specific clink of a sword guard against armor, the distinct shuffle of straw sandals, not leather boots, even the cadence of a whispered password, and the same architecture would dampen other noise, the murmur of a crowd, the wind, creating a sonic spotlight on what mattered. This was an organic intelligence, material-based. The palace itself was listening. It used the natural properties of its wood, its plaster, the emptiness to filter information. A guard in a distant tower wasn't just listening for noise. He was listening for the right note, the correct resonance, picked out by the building and delivered to his ear. Modern security is mostly visual, digital. We cover every angle with cameras. We line doors with magnetic sensors. These systems are powerful, but they're additive. They're layers of technology applied to a structure. The Resonant gallery was different. The security was the structure. The defensive function came from the choice of materials, the spacing of joists, the curve of a ceiling. To replicate that now wouldn't mean installing a system. It would mean growing one from the ground up. An architect would need to know intuitively how a certain pine resonates at a specific humidity, how a plaster mix transmits a high sound versus a low rumble. They'd need to design not just for space, but for soundscape. Weaving threat detection into the very aesthetics of a room, we have the physics to understand it, but we lack the craft, the tradition. That made such subtle, integrated vigilance second nature. It was a pinnacle of design, where every element served multiple purposes: beauty, structure, and an unblinking, silent ear. The idea of a building that listens, that's one thing, but a structure that tells a story with its bones, that's something else. The palace temples of Angkor, Angkor Wat, they're an eighth design mystery. They aren't monuments built on myth. They're myth turned into monument. Their infrastructure is cosmology carved right into the sandstone. The whole complex is a scale model of the Hindu universe, a sacred mountain rising from a moat, and that moat represents the cosmic ocean. That symbolic purpose, it dictated every choice, every architectural choice, and it created these load-bearing puzzles that still confound engineers. The most perplexing spaces are the internal galleries. Long, vaulted corridors and chambers, they seem to defy gravity. They're columns and walls, they're arranged not for optimal support, but in these intricate symbolic patterns. Patterns that mirror celestial maps. To walk through them is to walk through a star chart. The stone blocks here are colossal, and yet they're held aloft by gravity, by precise cutting, and by something more elusive, a hidden system. Internal counterweights and interlocking shapes that distribute weight along sacred geometric paths. The weight of a mountain of stone was channeled not just downward, but along preordained routes. Paths that aligned with spiritual laws, not merely physical ones. To replicate this design, you face a trilemma, a different order of trilemma. First, you have to solve the engineering puzzle of the interlocking stones. That's a task of immense precision. Second, you have to understand the celestial map, the specific symbolic meaning of every angle, every alignment. But the third step, the truly impossible step, is the synthesis. You have to build with the absolute conviction that the spiritual map and the physical structure are one and the same, that a column holds up the roof because it also represents an axis of the world, that a gallery curves because it traces the path of a deity. Modern architecture separates these domains. An engineer calculates load, an artist designs form. A spiritual advisor might consult on symbolism, but at Angkor, these were not separate roles. The architect was a priest engineer. For them, physics and faith were a single discipline. The knowledge to build such a place wasn't a set of blueprints. It was a lived, believed understanding of the cosmos, translated directly into stone. We could perhaps build a hollow replica, something that looks like Angkor Wat. but to build a new temple that carries the same profound structural certainty, where belief is not decoration, but the very mortar that would require us to believe as they did. It's a synthesis of mind, spirit, and material, a synthesis we simply no longer practice, a wall that holds warmth like a memory. That was the thing about the palaces. People talk about the floors, the heated floors, but the real thermal control was in the walls. These walls, they weren't just barriers. It were these layered systems, stone, clay, porous brick, built to act as thermal batteries. The idea was comfort through consistency, not a blast of heat but a stable warmth, something that would last through a cold night. So the whole palace envelope was designed to breathe, to work with the sun. In the daytime, sunlight or heat from fires would get absorbed, soaked up by these thick, dense walls, and the composition mattered. There was a dense inner layer to capture the heat, a middle layer of clay to regulate it, an outer layer of brick for insulation. It was a slow process. The walls didn't just get hot, they stored that energy deep inside. Then in the evening, when temperatures dropped, it would reverse. The walls would radiate the heat back inward, slowly, for hours. It created a stable microclimate inside the halls. The palace wasn't heated moment to moment. It was tuned, like a ceramic vessel holding the day's warmth. And modern analysis shows how precise it was. The thickness of the layers, the ratios, they changed based on the wall's orientation. A south-facing wall getting more sun had a different makeup than a north-facing one. The whole structure was a calibrated response to its valley, to the sun's path, to the local climate. We try to do this today. We use concrete for thermal mass, phase change materials in panels, but those are standardized, industrial, they lack the nuance. The builders used local, natural materials they knew intimately. They knew how a specific clay from a certain hillside would interact with a particular stone, over decades of expansion and contraction. Their knowledge was hyper-local, sustainable, deeply integrated. To replicate that design, you wouldn't just need a new blueprint, you'd need to rediscover that place-based material science. To build a wall not as a partition but as a living organ, part of the palace's climate, a testament to an idea that true comfort isn't delivered, it's cultivated. The psychological art of space, it's a subtle thing. In Renaissance Italy, in the palazzos, this art reached a kind of peak. Architects designed staircases not just for going up but for perception. They were called forced perspective staircases. Most are gone now, lost to renovation, to modern utility. But the design principle is still a puzzle. The idea was to choreograph the experience of moving through a grand home. From the bottom of a sweeping staircase, the climb could look imposing. Exhausting? The architect's solution wasn't to make it shorter. It was to make it feel shorter. Through an invisible manipulation of geometry, every element was a variable. The width of each step would subtly decrease as you went higher. The height of each riser would change by a fraction of an inch. The curvature of the handrail followed a precise, non-uniform arc. Even the pattern on the floor tiles at the base was part of the calculation. This careful, graduated distortion created an optical illusion. From the bottom looking up, the staircase appeared compressed, friendlier, less daunting. The journey seemed manageable, but from the top looking down, the reverse effect took hold. The vista appeared longer, more majestic, amplifying the sense of arrival, of authority for those who had made the climb. This was architecture directing human emotion, using mathematics and stone to manage anticipation, effort, and reward. We understand the theory. Forced perspective is the trick behind movie sets, theme park castles. But to build a functional, load-bearing staircase that does this, that carries the weight of centuries and daily use while performing this psychological ballet, that's another matter. It requires a synthesis we've largely set aside. The Renaissance architect saw no divide between the engineer, the artist, and the psychologist. The staircase had to be structurally sound, aesthetically magnificent, and emotionally intelligent. Today, our codes prioritize safety and accessibility, which is vital, but in doing so, we often standardize experience. A modern staircase is calculated for uniform treads and risers. It's consistent, predictable, safe, but it's rarely designed to shape a feeling. To replicate that lost design would mean abandoning that standardization. It would require an architect to think in 4 dimensions: length, width, height, and the human mind, from the very first sketch. To weave an illusion so seamless the climber never consciously notices the trick, only feels its effect, that graceful structural subtlety. It's a psychological art form our contemporary tools can analyze, but our functional philosophy has forgotten how to create. The psychological staircases changed how people saw things, but in another palace, time was controlled by water. In Constantinople, at the Great Palace, they turned the flow of hours into a show of state. There was a huge water clock in the throne room, but it wasn't just a clock. It was the central system for a whole mechanical theater. The infrastructure was the palace itself, a hidden system of lead pipes and bronze valves inside the walls, water tanks up above calibrated for pressure and volume. This hydraulic network powered gears and levers and counterweights. At the right hour, the water would build up and trip a mechanism. Then the room would wake up. Gilded birds would come out from hidden places to sing. Little lions made of wood and metal would rise up and roar silently, a motion for ambassadors. The water did more than move clock hands. It orchestrated a ritual. It made time visible and audible and majestic. The synchronization was a masterpiece of thought. The palace plumber and the clockmaker and the court choreographer had to be the same mind. Rebuilding it today, the challenge isn't the technology. We could make a digital version with speakers and animatronics easily. The lost art is the integration. To make a purely mechanical, hydraulic marvel the heart of a room built for empire. Every tick of that clock was a physical event, a consequence of weight and water. The spectacle depended on the architecture's hidden veins. To rebuild it, you wouldn't just put a device in a finished hall. You'd have to grow the hall around the device. The throne room would be a monumental clock casing. The walls would be designed for the sound of water, for the rumble of hidden weights. The state ceremony would be scheduled by the slow fill of a basin, not a sundial, not a bell. It was kinetic art as political power, a statement that the emperor could mechanize time, turn its march into a loyal servant for his court. We've replaced that tangible hydraulic certainty with silent digital pulses. Our time is everywhere and nowhere. Theirs was a singular, engineered moment. Built into the palace's stone, and meant to take your breath away, plumbing as a weapon. That's the idea behind the 12th design. Ancient Carthage, Rome's great rival, they understood a palace wasn't just a home, it was a fortress, and its best defense might have been in the pipes. Historical fragments point to a hydraulic network with a dual purpose. On peaceful days, it was a civil utility. It moved water for baths, for gardens. But in a crisis, with a lever pulled, that same network changed. It became an instrument for siege defense. A hidden anatomy of the city turned against attackers. The system relied on a secret, an intimate map of Carthage's topography. Builders would have used gravity from elevated reservoirs, directing pressure through hidden channels. The uses were strategic and psychological. A dry approach corridor seeming safe could be flooded from below, turning an advance into a quagmire. Other passages might be doused with oil or pitch, ready to be set alight. Or the system could drain certain areas, to instantly create new moats, isolating palace sections, confounding an invading force. This was infrastructure with a split personality. It asked water to be a sustainer of life and a tool of conflict. Designing such a system today is unthinkable, not for lack of engineering, but because our philosophy of architecture has changed. Modern plumbing codes are for safety, for sanitation, for predictable flow. They aren't written to let a building's water be weaponized. The idea runs counter to every principle of peaceful civic design. The Carthaginian approach was a holistic, militarized vision, civil and martial engineering as one. The palace's veins could carry a healing pulse or a lethal one. Replicating this would need more than technical skill. It would demand a mindset where every architectural decision from the foundation up is evaluated for defense. A mindset where beauty and utility are shadowed by the possibility of siege. We've left that integrated worldview behind. Our water systems are singular in purpose. They bring life in, they carry waste out. The Carthaginians saw water as a versatile servant of the state, capable of nurture or of stunning, calculated defiance. Their lost palaces stand as a reminder. The most advanced infrastructure is often born not from peace, but from the relentless pressure of an existential threat. Engineering shaped by the shadow at the gate, magnetic north was sacred. It was built into the floor. The 13th design is subtle and profound. It comes from old Chinese texts from the Qin and Han dynasties. The idea is that some lost palaces didn't just face north. They were aligned with it down to their molecular structure. Builders would embed loadstones, magnetite into the foundations and the pillars. These weren't hidden treasures. They were architectural components. Their purpose was alignment. A deep physical harmony between the palace and the planet. In a building is a living thing. Its energy, its chi, has to flow with the Earth's forces, and the Earth has a magnetic pulse. To put a palace in true harmony, you couldn't just point the door north. You had to tune its entire mass to resonate with that field. So imagine the process. Without a modern compass, using simple magnetic stones and generations of knowledge, artisans placed these lodestones at precise points. At the corners to anchor it, or in the central pillars as a spine, the goal was a building that didn't just sit on the land but was magnetically engaged with it. A stable orientation locked in stone. This implies a science ahead of its time. A working understanding that the Earth was a giant magnet and a building could be brought into sympathetic vibration with it. The effect would have been imperceptible. No hum, no glow, but to its creators it was everything. It was the difference between a house and a home for the cosmos. To try this design today presents an obstacle. We can source magnetite. We can use digital magnetometers for perfect alignment. We could build something that is, by our measures, perfectly tuned. But that misses the point. The original wasn't a technical exercise. It was a ceremonial act, a spiritual imperative made physical. The placement of each stone was a ritual from a complete cosmology where science, spirituality, art, and statecraft were one discipline. We compartmentalize these realms. An engineer handles the foundation. A designer handles the form. A philosopher discusses the meaning. In those lost palaces, these were not separate conversations. The architect was a geomancer. The blueprint was a prayer for harmony. To truly replicate it, you wouldn't just be constructing a building. You'd be trying to rebuild the worldview that made it necessary. You'd have to believe, fundamentally, that aligning stone with the planet's magnetic field was as crucial as a solid roof. It asks a haunting question. We can mimic the effect, but can we recover the intention? The conviction that a palace must be in magnetic conversation with the world, standardization on a massive scale. That's the 14th mystery. It changes how you see an empire's ambition. They're the great winged bulls at the gates of Nineveh. The huge wall relief showing hunts and battles. They look like they were carved right there into the palace walls. But that's not how it was done. They were assembled. The Assyrians had a system, a kind of modular prefabrication for their art. You picture the process. In quarries far away, workers cut these huge, standardized blocks of stone, and these weren't blank. In workshops, miles from the palace, artisans would start carving. They worked from templates, making parts of a story, a section of a horse, a king's arm. The details were partly finished, knowing it would connect to another block. Then came the logistics. Moving these multi-ton, partly carved blocks over rough ground, using sledges, rollers, rivers. Each piece had to arrive not just whole but perfectly matched to the piece next to it. The assembly was the final act. No cranes. They used ramps, levers, huge teams of labor. Lifting these giant puzzle pieces, aligning them, setting them in place. Then the final carving would blend the seams, make the joins disappear, creating that illusion of one continuous work. This was more than building. It was artistic industrialization. A lost form of project management. It needed an administrative mind of huge scope. Someone had to coordinate the quarries, the workshops, the transport, the on-site carvers, all the laborers, on a timeline for multiple palaces. They had to keep the art consistent across teams that never met. Make sure the face of a captive, started in one workshop, matched the torso carved in another. The scale of trust in that system is hard to grasp. We do prefabrication now. We build with modules made in factories. But our modules are uniform. They're for efficiency, for repetition. The Assyrian system was for creating unique narrative art at a palace scale. Each module was part of a custom story. To try and copy it today with our tools misses the point. We could 3D scan, we could carve with robots, we could ship with trucks. The impossible part is the human coordination. The administrative art of directing thousands of hands across vast distances with no digital communication. To create not a building, but a unified epic in stone. It tells you the empire saw its palaces not just as homes, but as distributed factories for propaganda. Where the message of power was so crucial, they industrialized the carving of it. A logistical symphony done with ropes and chisels. We can diagram it, but we may never really know how to conduct it. The final design is the most intangible, the most profound. It moves beyond stone, beyond water, into the air itself, into the mind that hears it. In ancient Egypt, in those palace temples, architecture wasn't just something you saw or touched, it was something you heard. And the hearing changed your consciousness. These were psychoacoustic spaces, ritual spaces. The goal wasn't just to make a priest's voice louder, it was to use the space as an instrument to tune the human nervous system. They built chambers with precise dimensions, calculated wall angles to create standing waves. Specific low frequencies would resonate through the stone. Frequencies that tradition knew could induce a deep focus, a calm, a ritual trance. the material mattered. A wall of dense granite would reflect sound with a hard clarity, a sustained tone. A screen of alabaster would absorb the higher pitches, leave just the deep, fundamental hum to fill the room. The entire chamber was a filter, a resonator. So a pharaoh in that setting wasn't just speaking words, he was activating the architecture. His chant or the strike of a sistrum would trigger the space's latent character. The resulting sound bath was meant to align everyone there, to shift them from ordinary awareness into a shared heightened state. This was spiritual technology, physics as the engine. Today engineers can map these chambers. They can identify the resonant frequencies, simulate the soundscape with models, but that's analysis, that's dissection. The lost part is synthesis for a living purpose. To design a new chamber from the first sketch with the goal of specific psychological effects through harmonic resonance, that's a challenge we don't face anymore. Our modern acoustics are functional. We design concert halls for clarity, lecture halls for intelligibility. We dampen echoes in offices for privacy. Our science serves utility or entertainment. The Egyptian model served transformation. It asked architecture to be a partner in religious experience, to use controlled vibration as a bridge between the material and the divine. Replicating this would need more than an acoustic consultant. It would need a client, a culture that believes sound can sculpt the soul, that the frequency of a room can be a form of prayer. We have the physics to build the shell, but we've set aside the sacred intent that would give it a voice. It stands as a quiet testament to a forgotten pinnacle where science wasn't a tool to explain the world. It was a method to transcend it. That psychoacoustic chamber at the end, it really points to something that connects all 15 of these designs. From stones to Constantinople's waterworks, they're all part of the same discipline, a complete way of thinking. For these builders, a wall wasn't just a wall, a pipe wasn't just a pipe. They were parts of a bigger system, a system woven from physics, from the environment, from human psychology, and from a kind of spiritual belief. The palace itself was an instrument, a device, a way to live in harmony with the world, sometimes to gently command it. The intelligence was in the infrastructure. That's the thread, the common idea, and it challenges how we build today. We work in silos. The engineer does the structure, the designer does the form, the acoustician handles the sound. These are different languages spoken from the very beginning, but in these places that separation didn't exist. The architect was the engineer, was the artist, was the psychologist, was the priest, all at once. So innovation for them, it wasn't about a new material, it wasn't about a bigger machine. It was about synthesis, the elegant fusion of purpose. A staircase could be strong, it could be beautiful, and it could be a tool for managing a visitor's sense of awe, all at the same time. A water channel could cool the air, it could create privacy with its sound, and it could power a mechanical spectacle for the state. That unity of vision, we struggle with that, even with all our computers and advanced materials. We can analyze each piece. But putting the whole philosophy back together, that interconnected mind, it feels just out of reach. So their legacy isn't a set of blueprints to copy, it's an inspiration, a reminder to look beyond just efficiency, to rediscover the art of the impossible in what we make, to ask not just what a building does but what it means, how it feels, how it talks to the world around it. These 15 lost designs, they're silent teachers. And if their mysteries fascinate you, well, think about what else we might find in the other forgotten chapters. Share in the comments which design you find most astonishing, and subscribe to join the exploration.